Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Bari'il Khilaiki Ajma'een. Wassalatu wassalam ala rasulihi wa habibihi Abil Qasim al-Mustafa Muhammad. وعلى أهل بيتي الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh jami'an. In his letter to his brother Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, Imam Hussein alayhi salam said, Inni lam akhruj ashiran wala batiran wala mufsidan wala dhaliman innama kharajtu litalab al-islah fi ummati jaddi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Indeed, I am going forth, I am uprising, not because of self-conceit or pride, not because I'm a corrupt person, not out of corruption, and not because out of dhulm, out of oppression, of being an oppressor. Indeed, I am going forth to seek Islah, to seek reformation in the ummah of my grandfather Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. So now he gets positive. Now he gets to the outward aspects of why he is uprising. First of all, he speaks about the inward aspects of not being corrupt, not being prideful or conceited, and not being an oppressor. Now, what does he want to do? He wants to do Islah. He wants to create reformation, to change, in the positive sense, the Ummah, the community of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إنما المؤمنون إخوة فاصلحوا بين أخويكم واتقوا الله لعلكم ترحمون. The believers are indeed brothers. And brothers here, of course, means, in a general sense, it means brothers and sisters. The believers are indeed brothers, therefore make peace between you, do Islah between you, and beware of Allah so that you may receive His mercy. So one of the conditions for a society, and a Muslim society, to get the mercy of Allah is to do Islah, is to do reformation, is to create the proper relationship between themselves and their environment, between themselves and their belief, between themselves and their community. It comes from sola, which of course many of us translate as being free, as being at peace, being at peace. But it means being at peace in the sense of being in the right order of things, having the right order of things. And this is very important, for example, because in today's world, we have peace. Okay, you say there is peace in America in a certain general sense. You will say there's peace in the world in a certain general sense, but it's not peace based upon the order of things. It's not peace based upon the order of things. When we talked the other day about 300 of the richest people in the world having the combined wealth of 300 million people in the world, okay? and there is no uprising against this, you can't say this is a state of peace. Okay? This is a state of quietude. This is a state of suppression. This is a state of propaganda, you know, because you can only keep such people down or not thinking by having programs to keep them from thinking. As I mentioned to you before, one of the last times when people rose up in the West, especially, and before that you find the anti-colonial movements taking place in the world, the last major uprisings in the world, including the anti-colonial movements and uprisings in the West, took place in the 1960s. And after that, what the powers that be did was to create a state of existence that would prevent people from doing that. And as I mentioned before, one of the ways they did this was to, for example, do things like reorganize the educational system, you know, not to concentrate on the arts, or not really concentrate on the arts, but not to include the arts, to weaken the arts, the humanities, because it's that type of thinking, you know, philosophical thinking, political thinking, sociological thinking, historical thinking, that act to change the world. People who think like that have an idea of where we came from and where we are going to. And what they have done is instead inculcated in people, look, university is not a place to go to fulfill your ideals. This is what university was in my time and in the time of your fathers and grandfathers, you know, in the time of those people who changed the society. University was a place you went to fulfill an ideal. You wanted to change the world, for example. You wanted to change the society to make it a better society. Now they wanted to reduce universities to a place where you go just to find a good job, where you find a great career so you could make some good money, buy a nice car, a nice house, get a nice spouse, and everything is going to be right, you see? And so you find people not having the kind of thought that would be necessary in order to change the world. One of the problems, for example, that Muslim communities, especially the Shia community, in America, Canada, wherever in the West you might find, one of the problems of our communities is we don't have, for example, artists. We don't encourage our children to be artists. You know, your child wants to study art. They want to study playwriting. You know, they want to study, I don't know, architecture. They want to study screenwriting or poetry or literature and so forth. The parent tells that child, are you crazy? How are you going to get money like this? Where are you going to find a job? You know, and so they take them and they shove them all into the areas of the sciences or the career, fields like law and accounting and so forth. Now, these careers are very important. There's no doubt about it. You know, without that, our societies cannot be built on a firm, let's say, economic or industrial or scientific base. This is very important. But what creates change in people's thinking is not engineering, is not medicine, is not physics. It doesn't create a change in people's thinking about their society. What creates a change in people's thinking about society are the arts, the fine arts, and the humanities. How did, for example, minority groups like the Jewish communities in the West get so powerful? You would find, if you look at many Hollywood movies, who do you find being the writers? Who do you find being the producers? Who do you find being the screenwriters and the directors and so forth? They come from that particular community. And so the arts is something that can prepare the mind of people, put in the mind of people the ideas necessary for people to move forward. And you find, because of the fact that the older generation suppresses the younger generation, our older generation suppresses our younger generation, because when they have ideas like, look, Dad, I want to be an artist. Dad, I want to be a designer. Mom, I want to be a director. Uncle, I want to write plays. We do not encourage our youth to actualize that particular potential, and we end up suffering. We end up suffering. And so you want to build a mosque, we have to hire people on the outside, non-Muslims, to build a mosque for us. Because we want to, for example, let's say, have a procession for Ashura. There is no creative input in Ashura. If you look at Ashura in many of these larger cities, they lack creativity. They do. They lack creativity. You know, by now, what we should have, because in the West, there are so many different processions, so many different marches, so many different, pageants and displays on the street. And when you look at it, there's a whole lot of creativity. Why, when we go and march for Ashura, for example, don't we have people dressed up like Shimr on a horse, or people dressed up like Ali Asghar, the scarf and all that type of thing? Why don't we have these types of things? Why don't we have people, showing the role? Why don't we have even, as much as you would like, why don't we have not too many English banners? So you're a non-Muslim and you're standing on the side of the street and you're watching these people pass by and you have absolutely no idea what they're doing. And then all of a sudden they stop in the middle of the road, take off their shirts and start to hit themselves. What are these people going to think? Right? What are these people going to think? Some of them even want to go and shed their own blood on the street. I mean, come on. Just a simple reading of psychology, for example, or public relations could tell you what is the most effective way to be able to carry this out. And this is our problem today. You see, we do not have people who can convey the message of Islam in a great package, in an artistic way, in a creative way, because we have suppressed our creative talent. And this requires, for example, Islah. Because in every society, the artist has his or her place. The director has his or her place. The screenwriter has his or her place. The costume designer has his or her place. The poet has his or her place. Why has rap music spread so far in the world? Because of creativity. Because of creativity. So you find that, for example, I'm an anti-rap music kind of guy, as you should probably surmise by now. I definitely am anti-nasty rap, I'm anti-bling-bling rap, But when rap came out in my time, and I used to be a DJ at one time, when rap came out in my time, it was all about talking about police brutality. It was all about talking about criticizing society. One of my biggest groups was Public Enemy. You probably would never hear somebody say something like this on the minbar, I'm telling you. Right? Public Enemy. Okay? Their music was not dance music. Their music was a kind of an accompaniment for you to hear what they were saying. All right? And they would call themselves Public Enemy because they saw themselves as the enemy of the state. And in the 1980s, guess what was the major vehicle for the spread of Islam in the black and Hispanic community in the United States of America? Rap music. Right? Why? Because they were creative. And this has spread all over the world. You have people rapping in Palestine against Israeli occupation and Zionism and all these types of things. What is our creative contribution to the contemporary world? Us Shias, this beautiful culture of Hussainiya, this beautiful culture of martyrdom, What have we contributed? By now they should be all singing about Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Today everybody should be making poems, Muslim and non-Muslims, about Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But we have done nothing. Why? Because we have suppressed our creative talent. And so therefore we ourselves need Islah. We ourselves need the ability to put things in their proper place in society and make our society a better one. I'm not saying that you guys should have rap, should play rap, I'm not saying that, right? You might have your own creative, inventions. Why not? This is how it starts. All these movements, all these cultural movements start somewhere. Okay? You could bring your own thing into existence. And this is why, for example, it is very, very important for us to read and study culture, read and study the growth or the spread of different types of culture. Because just as nature abhors a vacuum, so too, that if we do not have a relevant culture to be able to express our beliefs and our passions, somebody's going to fill that with some kind of nonsense. And you ask yourself, what are we doing? Why is it that these Western types of ideas and forms of entertainment are penetrating among our youth? Because we are stagnant. Culture is not a static thing. Culture is never a static thing. Culture is something dynamic. Every generation, every age has its own cultural expression. It does not stay static. And if it does, it becomes stale. And when it becomes stale, people in themselves are going to find some need to be able to come out of that stagnation. And sometimes the only thing that is available to them is something that is not Islamic. Give salawat to the Holy Prophet Muhammad and his family. So Islam involves harmony, a mutually satisfactory relationship between different parties, different entities, where you both get along, you both come up with, or you come up with something that incorporates that thing, that changes that thing. You change yourself to incorporate that thing whilst remaining true to your beliefs and so forth. And so, for example, we live in a world right now that has a kind of a universal type of cultural dynamic taking place. A universal type of cultural dynamic taking place. And this is why, again, as I mentioned, I say rap music here in Kuwait, everybody knows what I'm talking about. Why? Because you're familiar with it. It's a universal dynamic. All right, now you look at this and you ask yourself, is this suitable for my belief? Is this suitable for my ethics? Is this suitable for my cultural expression? Okay, how can I change this if it might be, but it might have certain problems with it? How can I change it? How can I express my own cultural form on the world stage, for example, and influence others? This is how we should be thinking. But for us to do this, we have to be creative. We have to be creative. So Imam alayhi salam is using the word Islah in his speech to talk about the suitability of one thing to another. In this case, the suitability of the Ummah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Islam. That the Ummah which belongs to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which defines itself as Islamic, is moving away from Islam. And in moving away from Islam, you have a distortion. You have a deviation. And it's to bring them back to Islam, to bring them back to expressing this Islam. So you pair, for example, the Ummah, for example, with the Sunnah, or the Muslim with Islam. If the Muslim is deviating, if the Muslim is not practicing properly, then you bring them back to Islam. Now, there are things in Islam that are fixed, and there are things in Islam that are flexible. For example, let's say marriage. Okay, marriage has a certain fixed aspect to it. For example, the mahr, the act, okay, obeying the rules about who could marry who and so forth. But outside of that, for example, things like the walima, what color you wear, how you appear, what you do in the walima. Maybe you might bring somebody to give a speech. Maybe you might bring somebody to give a poem. Maybe in the women's section, they might have this or they might have that. Many of these things are flexible. And so you find in Islam room to modify or to apply or reapply your Islam. And for this reason, this is why we have in the entire world community basically one Islam, if we ignore the idea of madhahib and so forth, one Islam, but many different outward forms. So you can leave here and you could go to Indonesia and you could find that these Muslims here are different in their customs, for example, in their dress, in their speech, in their language, and so forth, in their relationships with each other. But at the same time, they pray the same way as they pray in Mecca. You see? And you could go from here and you go to Nigeria and you can find something quite different among Muslims there in Nigeria as opposed to what's happening in Indonesia and so forth. Still finding similarities and things that are stable, and also things that are also representative of the general culture that they have. The interesting thing, the very most important thing in this era, in this time, is that there is a tendency to move to a kind of uniculture. And this is because of social media, television, travel. Practically everybody has some family living in some other part of the world, for example. Everybody is trying to learn English. Maybe in the next 50 years, everybody be trying to learn Chinese, And yeah, imagine 50, 100 years from now, everybody's learning Chinese, and I'm up here and I'm talking to you. I won't be talking to you in the same English. I'll be talking to you in English peppered with Chinese phrases, for example. As they say in China, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, oh, yes, good, I understand that. This is culture. This is culture. You try to prevent that. What you're doing is you're actually cutting off your ability to communicate with people. All right? And this is Islah. This is Islah. Right now, for example, a lot of our youth are having problems with Islam. A lot of our youth have problems with Islam. And they need explanations. And the old explanations don't work. You have to speak to them in today's language. You have to speak to them in terms of psychology and sociology and science and so forth. This is how you have to speak to them. And then they understand what you're talking about. You can't be speaking to them according to the words of somebody who was speaking 200 years ago. It just does not fall on the same ears. You have people, for example, who are involved in drug abuse, who are involved in listening to the wrong kind of music. You have to be able to answer these types of questions according to the society in which you live. I remember when I was a younger man, I was in my, late 20s perhaps, and maybe late 20s, early 30s, I was at that point very much against rap music. I don't want to go back to rap music, but I guess I have to because it's a cultural thing. As an older guy now, you see, because older people tend to be, kind of resistant to new changes and so forth. And I remember one young man said to me, he said, if you want to know how the youth think, you need to listen to this. Not to listen to it to enjoy, right? But listen to it to hear how they think. Because this is how they express themselves, and you know what is going on. And I took that to heart, and it made a lot of difference in me connecting with them. I have my youngest brother. He's not really a young brother anymore. He's like in his 50s now, but he was much cooler than me and much more in touch with everything. And whenever I had a chance to give a talk to a high school, I'll call him and tell me 3 or 4 of the latest slang words. And he'd give it to me. And I go up there in front of them youth, and they're thinking, oh, some boring religious guy is going to come and talk to us. And I see them when they start falling asleep, and I drop 1 or 2 of those slangs. They just wake right up. He's cool. I went to a majlis once. I had my shaky clothes on, and I was wearing a pair of Converse underneath it. They saw my Converse, they're like, oh, I'm coming to his talk. I want to hear what he's got to say. You see? It's a matter of communication. It's a matter of being flexible. It's a matter of incorporating those things that are not anti-Islam. This is what culture is. You see? And so our society, we need Islah, because I think we tend to be a bit, rigid, not flexible. And that makes us lose our audience. It makes us lose our youth. It makes us not being able to follow things. We have to know about politics. We have to know about international politics. We have to. We have to know about international economic relations, because we have a part to play, whether you are aware of it or not. And if you are aware of it, this is where you can do Islah. Give salawat to the Holy Prophet Muhammad and his family. With respect to the Muslim Ummah at the time, the Muslim Ummah were following the wrong leader. They called themselves Muslim, and at the same time, that leader who they were following, Yazid, Muawiyah, Yazid, and others, these are people who were leading prayer while drunk. These are people who were fornicators. These are people who were murderers, and so forth and so on. And they were afraid to do anything about it. This is not a proper Muslim community. Because as we would talk again, maybe tomorrow or even today, one of the things that we have to do, as Imam Hussein alayhi salam said that he was rising up for, is to do Amr Ma'ruf wa Nahy al-Munkar, to exhort the right and forbid the wrong. And so when we do not do these things, what we do is we leave the ground for ignorance to spread. And when ignorance spreads, we are unable to change our environment. Now, there are different levels of Islah. And like all other things, it begins at home. You see, charity begins at home. Islah begins at home. It begins, first of all, with yourself. I must be able to reform and correct myself, and to put myself in tune with the Islam that is necessary for me to practice in this society and to create change in society. So the Holy Prophet, for example, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, had a very interesting hadith where he says, let the advice a man gives to his brother be the same as the advice he gives to himself. Let the advice a man gives to his brother be the same as the advice he gives to himself. So you do Islah to yourself, and then you can do it to your brother. Now, there's a question about what is the relationship between the two? Do I have to be perfect? Do I have to be perfect in the advice I give to myself before I give the advice to my brother? No, you don't have to be perfect, but you have to be actually working on it. You have to be actually applying yourself to it for you to give that advice. So maybe, for example, you want to tell your brother, look, you must pray Salatul Layl, every night. You must pray Salatul Layl every night. Yeah? And so you're trying to pray Salatul Lail every night. And maybe, okay, every week you probably pray 3 times, 4 times, 4 nights in every week or 3 nights in every week. But it's quite difficult for you to pray every night in every week because maybe of how your work schedule is or what have you. It does not make you, it doesn't make Islah invalid for you to do. Yeah? What makes you a hypocrite is if you don't do it at all. You know, you stay away from it. It's not you, but you're telling somebody to do something that you are not doing. This is what makes it hypocritical. You see? But you should be attempting it. You should be trying to do it. You should be striving at it. You might not be perfect at it, but you are moving towards perfection of it. And you should be able to apply that to other people. So if you see, for example, Muslims are not praying, and you are not praying, before you start advising people to pray, you start to pray first. And maybe after your first 3 days of praying regularly, then you can talk to somebody and say, you know, you should pray. Right? Even though maybe tomorrow you might miss it. A'udhu billah. On the level of the family, for example, we could do Islah. On the level of the family, we can do Islah. You know, in fact, the first place, the first social environment in which you can do Islah is on the level of the family. You know, with ourselves and our spouses, with our children, you know, and children to parents, you know. It doesn't mean, it's not a one-way street. You know, kids watch you. Kids watch you, right? Kids know if you're fooling or not. Kids know if you're hypocritical or not. Kids know if you're stepping up to the plate or not. You see? It is how you advise your parents. That is very, very important. You have to always maintain that relationship of respect with them. And a very good example is Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain alayhim salam, where for example, you know, they saw an old man doing wudu improperly. These are 2 imams. You see an old man doing wudu improperly. You think they walked up to him and say, "Yeah, Sheikh, you're not doing your wudu properly, this is how you do it"? No. You have to respect that old man. So they devised a ruse. They came up to the old man and said, Oh Sheikh, my brother and I, we're having a disagreement in what's the best way to make wudu. I'll show you how I make wudu, he'll show you how he makes wudu, and you tell us which one is doing the right thing. And this is how they taught him. The old man was a wise man. He saw what they were doing. He knew what their purpose was. And he praised them. He said, "Thank you very much for teaching me this in this particular way." You know, so you have to be very careful how you do Islah to those people who have greater gravity than you. You know, always in Islam, we respect social discipline when it comes to respect. When it comes to giving honor, we always respect social discipline. When we have that social discipline, that leads us to social power. It leads us to social power. And you can see it in cities like London and Toronto and so forth, where you have huge immigrant communities. You know, wherever you find people from third world countries, especially Asia, but also places like Africa as well, and Muslim countries, you find that the schools in those areas where these numbers predominate tend to score higher on exams and in academic achievement than others. You find that in the rest of the society, where relationships between parents and children are breaking down, where children, for example, swear at their parents, you know, and show them lack of respect and so forth, you find that these societies are not growing. These environments are not developing. Why? Because there is no social discipline in that society. Social discipline is extremely important. And this is why, for example, you have countries like South Korea, China, you know, India, which is now rising quite rapidly and so forth, being successful in their economics, in industry, and so forth and so on. Whilst you find Western countries, many Western countries, declining on that particular basis. Also, for example, we have to realize that there are different or advanced ways of educational training, of the educational system. We have to take a page out of their book and apply it to ourselves. So for example, you have Finland, I'm sure many of you might know, having one of the most superior types of educational systems in the world. Take it, apply it in your environment. The Holy Prophet ﷺ says that ilm is the lost heritage of the Muslims. That means that you can take ilm from anywhere. You can take that and apply it to yourself. He said, seek knowledge, even if you have to go to China. What was China in that time? China wasn't a secular country where you can go there and learn from Chinese secularism, so it's not Islamic, it's not any religion, and you can apply it to your Islamic state. China was Buddhist. Buddhist through and through. So if you went to China and you wanted to get knowledge in China, you were getting knowledge that Buddhist people in their own tradition developed, And what you can do, you can take that knowledge without necessarily taking their religious values or their religious beliefs. See, take for example yoga. Look at yoga right now. Okay, yoga has deep roots in Hinduism. But yoga has a physical aspect to it that you can take and you can leave the Hinduism behind. This is how the West grew from Islam. They grew from Islam. They took the books of Ibn Sina. They left his book, his work on theology. They didn't need that. But they needed his work on medicine. And because of this, their medical technology, their medical knowledge grew and developed. They still today have great respect for the works of Ibn Sina. This is Islam. This is adapting your society according to the needs of your time without necessarily contradicting your Islam. Give salawat to the Holy Prophet Muhammad and his family. Then we have Islam also on a level of community, Islam between each other. When we see our brother or sister not acting properly, when you see our brother or sister having a wrong idea of Islam, when we see our brother and sister not interfacing properly with our deen, we could advise them on this. This is the way to success. If we do not do so, then our society can fall apart, or worse even, become an imitator of those people who have no belief at all. So, as we see, Islam applies first to the self. You do it with yourself, and then you do it with other people. And when you behave like that, inshallah, we have a society that will thrive. Now, he also talks about Amr al-Ma'ruf and Nahy al-Munkar. He said he's rising up to exhort the right and to forbid the wrong. Allah says in the Holy Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةً يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. From among you, he says, let there come up a community that invites towards goodness, exhorting the right and forbidding the wrong, and they're the ones who are the muflihun. They are the ones who are the successful. What Allah is saying is, success, true Islamic success. And when we say success, Allah means success in a complete sense. Right? Doesn't mean success only in a moral sense or success only in an economic sense. And so it means total success. for total success in your community, it would be a success that comes to that community that behaves in this manner, that exalts the right and forbids the wrong. Today, we are talking about success purely on a material level, purely on a dunyawi level. You know, we measure success purely in terms of GDP, for example. We measure success purely in these sort of empirical senses. What Allah is saying is if you really want true success, which would be holistic and complete, you have to be a community like this. And this is, I believe, one of the reasons why Islam has been so successful in the United States, especially in the pre-Trump era or the pre-9/11 era. And I do believe that 9/11 was not only a false flag operation to open the doors for an American push to world domination or increased world domination and seizing oil resources on a more extensive level. I do believe that 9/11 was a desperate attempt to stop the spread of Islam in America itself by creating this type of disaster and attributing it to Islam. Because before 9/11, the Islam was spreading at such a rate in the African American and Hispanic community that it was said, at the end of the 20th century, it was said that by the 21st century, the religion of the majority of African Americans would be Islam. The religion of the majority of African Americans would be Islam. And why? Because these Muslims were doing Islah in their own communities. And it arrived at a state where anybody of any substance who would stand up in front of the people and organize them and give a speech, for example, whether they were Muslim or not, they will stand up and say to the community, Assalamu alaikum. When you said that, everybody paid attention because they knew you had something important to say. Everybody would pay attention because they knew that you were serious. Everybody paid attention because they knew that you were speaking from outside the box. You were not speaking within the parameters of what they allowed you to speak. You'd be speaking from a new creative point of view about what was going on in your society. When Allah says that there should be a community among us to do this, what better community should there be than us, the followers of Ahlul Bayt? What better community? You don't have to walk around saying that I'm a Shia and I'm a this and I'm a that. You don't have to do this. Because as soon as you open your mouth, they will say, you know what? He or she sounds like one of those followers of those Ahlul Bayt people. You know? It's one of those guys because they always have something good to say. This is exactly what happened in the United States of America. There was I would call it a pseudo-Islamic group. Pseudo-Islamic group. They weren't the typical Islamic group. I don't even know if you can call them Islamic, but they did say Shahadatain. They had different meanings for the Shahadatain. A group called the Nation of Islam. I don't want to get into what the Nation of Islam was, but another name for them was the Black Muslims. Okay, they were quite nationalistic. They were very much, oriented to fighting against oppression against African Americans in America and so forth and so on. Very much so. A point was reached where if anybody met a stranger and that person said that I'm a Muslim, the first question they would ask them, are you Nation of Islam? Why? Because they became the yardstick, the standard by which they could identify a Muslim. And so now you had to define yourself as whether you were Nation of Islam or not. We had a similar type of thing in Toronto, Canada. When I just became a Shia, we used to do a lot of work among the mustadafin in our city. A lot of work. And we only about, I would say, maybe maximum 15 guys. 15 people. Until a point was reached. Whenever somebody encountered an African Canadian who said he was a Muslim, they'll ask him, are you Shia? Isn't that powerful? That is very powerful. You know? The Wahhabis used to be tearing out their hair from their heads in frustration. They'd be like, the Shias are everywhere. 15 guys. 15 people. So active. Don't think that you have a small number and your small number makes you less effective. No, it's not about quantity. It's about quality. But you have to have the confidence to be able to stand your ground. And if you are seen as a person who is always of assistance to people, who is always generous, who is always kind, who always has a good advice to give, who is always humble, who is always friendly, who is always listening. After they meet 2 or 3 of you like this, and you all come from the same background, the next person who is nice to them like that, they will think that they are one of you. This is how you do it. It's not about numbers. It's about quality. And this is how Islam spread in Mecca. It didn't spread by the sword. It didn't spread by the sword at all. You know, by the time the Holy Prophet did his hijrah to Medina, already the reputation of these Muslims was so great that the people in Yathrib, which is Medina today, thought it was a good idea to invite him and his people to come and do Islah in their environment. Because you know, between the Medinas, they used to have lots of wars between them, the Aus and Khazraj and so forth. Lots of dissension between them. And he thought that these guys could do something for this. They can help us out. They could make us strong. They can bring us together. This is the kind of reputation that we need to establish in our society. You know, this is more important than, for example, forming a group, which is very important, which is very good, forming a group, forming an association, you know, forming some charitable organization and so forth. Much more important than that is your own individual actions on your level of operation, whether it's at school, whether it's at work, whether it's in the university, whether it's even with your own kids at home, how you train them and how you correct them in order for them to go out there. Give salawat to the Holy Prophet Muhammad and his family. Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam said, indeed, the person who enjoins good and prohibits wrong should possess 3 qualities. One is that he should act upon which he enjoins. He must do what he is commanding you or exhorting you or encouraging you to do. That person must do it as well, do it themselves. Live it. Live it before you encourage it. Abstain from what they prohibit. When they say, when you tell them don't do something, you yourself are not doing that thing. He must be just regarding that which he enjoins, and be just regarding that which he prohibits. Must be just. And this justice is extremely important. In other words, when he tells you to do something, you must know that, for example, telling you to do that thing is not something that is going to put unnecessary hardship upon you. And how he presents it to you is in a way that it should be in conjunction with your environment, whether it is enjoining or prohibiting. And he must be gentle in that which he enjoins and gentle in that which he prohibits. And that's a very important one, because I think many of us tend to become quite egotistical. I've seen it among, some of the other guys. Where, for example, you know, I pray, I fast. You know, I'm a striving Muslim, so I'm out there preaching to people and being angry with people if they do something wrong. If they do something wrong, be angry with them and not show them approval or not show them that I like them or show them I love them, you know, and I should be commanding them all over the place. No. You have to be gentle. You have to be gentle. You see, and being gentle means being patient. Being patient. And this is with the kids as well. To be patient. To talk with them. You know, don't lose your cool. Don't lose your temper. You know, try to find different ways of getting the message across. You know, like Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, for example, with that old man. Try to find a beautiful way to get that message across. Not alienate that person when you speak to them. And inshallah, you, as a community of people who do this, would be eminently successful. Give salawat to the Holy Prophet Muhammad and his family. So tonight is the 9th night of the 10 nights of Moharram. And tonight is a night of Abbas. By this time, where Abbas goes onto the battlefield, all of the companions of the Imam have been martyred. All of the able-bodied men and young men and boys in his following have been martyred. And it's now just Imam Hussein and Abbas. By this time, the children are very, very thirsty. And there is a crisis in the camp for the needs of the children to be met. Abbas is the one who is selected for this role by Allah, by providence. And this is foreshadowed in the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam, where there's a story that says that when Imam Ali alayhi salam was on the pulpit in Kufa and was giving a khutbah, Abbas, who had a very strong attachment to his brother Imam Hussein alayhi salam, was sitting there and he was looking at Hussein, and he saw that his lips were dry. And Abbas ran out and brought water back for Hussein. And in rushing to Hussein to bring the water, Imam Ali saw this and he started to weep. The water was spilling on Abbas's both hands. He came down from the pulpit and he embraced Abbas. And later on they asked him, "Why did you do this?" And he said, "These two hands will be cut off of this beautiful boy who is bringing water for his brother." So Sakina and the children are crying, "Atash, Atash, we are thirsty, we are thirsty." And it said Sakina comes up to Abbas and she puts the water skin in front of him and she says, "Oh uncle, I know you would get water from the river. Even if you brought one water skin, it would be enough for us to wet our dry throats." Abbas at this point was very frustrated that he was not able to get water for the children. So he came to Imam Hussein alayhi salam and said he wants permission to get the water. Imam Hussein gives him the permission and Abbas goes towards the river. By that time, the river is closely guarded by over 1,000 men. And Abbas talks to these people and he says to them, even the animals could drink the water from this river. Why don't you not allow even the family of the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the children of Hussein, to drink this water? And somebody cried out, if Hussein gets water, it would be difficult to fight him on the battlefield. You'll have no water unless you give allegiance to Yazid. The enemy mounted an attack on lone Abbas. But Abbas, the Qamar Bani Hashim, the moon of the Bani Hashim, the most beautiful of all the men of the Bani Hashim, the tall, strong Abbas standard bearer, he defended himself and he killed, they say, about 80 people when he reached the water. And you know, when you are very thirsty and you see water, you know, your first instinct is to go and drink some of that water. He said Abbas went to the river and he cupped the water in his hands, and before he put it in his mouth, he looked back and he remembered the thirst of Hussein and his family. He threw the water back and filled the water skin. On the way back, Abbas is being assailed from all sides. Arrows are flying everywhere. They hit the shield. They hit everywhere. And he's going through the soldiers. And then one soldier hit an ambush, and they say he struck off his right hand. Abbas quickly grabbed his sword in his left, and he put the water skin in his teeth, and he continued to ride towards Hussein's camp. All Abbas wanted to do was to bring that water back to give to those thirsty children. That's all he wanted to do, until an arrow pierced the water skin and he saw all of the water pour on the road, pour on the sand. Abbas lost his hope. Abbas lost his hope. Being distracted like that, somebody else came out and hit his other hand, and now Abbas had no hands and he was losing blood. He kept the standard between himself, his chest, and the horse's neck. And then finally somebody struck his head with a mace. And as he fell, you know, brothers and sisters, when you fall, you automatically put your hands out to break your fall. Abbas had no hand to break his fall. Abbas crumpled on the ground. Say, Assalamu alaikum, Ya Aba Abdullah. Imam Hussein heard Abbas and he rushed to Abbas. Abbas was there lying on the ground. Imam Hussein alayhi salam comes upon Abbas and he says to him, "Oh Abbas, my back is broken now. I have lost my support." Abbas thanks him. He said, "Thank you for coming, my master. I was afraid I would not get the opportunity to tell you goodbye." Imam Hussein puts Abbas's head on his lap. After a while, Abbas takes his head off of Imam Hussein's lap and puts it on the ground. Hussein asked him, "Abbas, why did you do this?" He said, "Because when you fall, there's no lap for you to put your head." Hussein burst into tears. Abbas whispered gently. He said, "My master, I have some last wishes. When I was born, the first face I saw was your face. And when I die, I want to see your face as the last face I see. But one of my eyes is injured with an arrow and the blood has fallen into the other eye. Could you remove, because you had no hand, could you remove the blood from my eye so I can see you?" And he looked upon his brother. He said, "My second wish is this. I don't want you to carry my body back to the tent. You're exhausted. And I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed because I did not bring the water for the children. I can't bear to be going back there with me not being successful. So I want you to leave my body right here. And I don't want Sakina to see it because it will break her heart. Because Sakina is up there waiting for the standard bearer to come back, and he doesn't come back. He's way out there, he doesn't come back." Hussein, between sobs, agreed. And then he says, "Oh Abbas, I too have one wish. Since childhood, you used to call me master. But now, for once, at least one time, call me brother." Abbas looked at his brother and he said, my brother. And Abbas passed away. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, wa ala al-wahi allati hallat bifina'ik. Alayka minni salamullahi abadan ma baqit, wa baqiya al-layl wa nahar. Assalamu ala al-Hussein, wa ala Ali ibn al-Hussein, wa ala awlad al-Hussein, wa ala ashab al-Hussein.